I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. It was a Tuesday evening in October, the kind where amber streetlights reflect off wet pavement and the air carries that distinct autumn chill. I'd left work early to surprise Melissa with takeout from her favorite Thai place, a small gesture to make up for how busy I'd been the past few weeks with the Johnson account. We'd been together for 4 years, lived together for 2, and I'd already picked out the ring hidden in my sock drawer. Funny how life's biggest transitions can hinge on the smallest decisions, like choosing to come home at 6:30 instead of my usual 8 o'clock. I heard them before I saw them. That's the detail that still makes my stomach turn. The sound of another man's laughter mixing with hers, echoing down our narrow hallway. I stood frozen, paper bag growing damp in my grip as condensation from the container seeped through. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk out, pretend I'd never come home early. But there's a masochistic curiosity that drives us toward pain when we sense it coming, like tongues probing aching teeth. The door to our bedroom was ajar, just enough to frame a slice of our lives in theatrical spotlight. His hand on her naked back, her head thrown back in familiar ecstasy, their bodies moving in rhythm on the sheets I'd helped her pick out during our anniversary weekend trip. The Thai food hit the floor with a dull thud, and suddenly I was visible in their periphery, an unwanted audience member who'd wandered on stage. "Jason!" Melissa's voice came out strangled, panicked. Her lover, a guy I vaguely recognized from her office, scrambled to cover himself, eyes wide with the universal expression of men caught where they shouldn't be. What followed was a blur of shouted accusations, tearful denials, and finally cruel clarity. I remember standing in our living room, my body numb but somehow still upright, as she transformed from apologetic to defensive in the span of minutes. "It's not like this just happened." She finally snapped, her mascara leaving inky trails down flushed cheeks. "We've been unhappy for months. You're just too absorbed in your work to notice." "Months?" I echoed, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "You've been cheating for months?" She looked away, jaw set in that stubborn line I once found endearing. 3. With different people." The room tilted. I gripped the back of our couch, the one we'd argued over because I thought it was too expensive, but I'd given in because she loved it. "Different people? As in plural?" "Don't act so shocked," she said, gathering confidence with each word. "Our relationship has been on life support forever. I needed something you weren't giving me." "And what was that exactly?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Passion, excitement, a man who actually notices me." Her words were precision-guided missiles targeting my deepest insecurities. "I tried, Jason. I tried to make it work with someone. Safe. Dependable." She pronounced these words like they were diseases. "But I need more." I stared at her, this stranger wearing my girlfriend's face. "Why not just break up with me? Why the deception?" She laughed then, actually laughed, and the sound crystallized something inside me. "Because I wasn't sure, okay? I needed to explore my options before making a decision." "Your options," I repeated flatly. "Yes. And honestly?" Her eyes narrowed, voice hardening with cruelty I never knew she possessed. "You should thank me. You're comfortable, Jason. Predictable. You'll never surprise anyone, never take risks. You think proposing to me with that boring solitaire hidden in your drawer is going to fix things?" My blood turned to ice. "You went through my things?" "I was looking for a charger," she dismissed with a wave. "Found your sad little ring instead. Classic Jason, practical, sensible, boring as hell. Face it, you'll never do better than me. You should be grateful I stayed as long as I did." Those words, "you'll never do better than me," they didn't just hurt. They burrowed under my skin like parasites, making a home in the darkest recesses of my mind. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The devastation was still there, but alongside it grew something colder and more focused. I left that night with a duffel bag of essentials, checking into a hotel where I stared at the ceiling until dawn. I called in sick the next day, then the next. By Friday, I'd found a month-to-month apartment I could move into immediately. I returned to our place while I knew Melissa would be at work, packing methodically, separating our intertwined lives with clinical precision. The weeks that followed were a gray blur. I threw myself into work with an intensity that concerned my colleagues but impressed my bosses. The Johnson account, the one I'd been neglecting Melissa for, closed successfully, earning me a substantial bonus and newfound respect in the office. I established a routine: work, gym, apartment, sleep. Repeat. Friends called and texted, but I kept conversations brief. My parents sensed something was wrong but respected my vague explanations of growing apart. I was a mannequin going through the motions of life, perfectly functional but hollow inside. The only emotions that penetrated the numbness were sudden, violent surges of anger or despair that would ambush me at random moments. Catching a whiff of Melissa's favorite perfume on a passing stranger, seeing our favorite restaurant while driving, finding one of her hairbands in the pocket of a jacket I hadn't worn since moving out. It was during one of these moments, about 6 weeks after the split, that I ran into Claire at the grocery store. I was standing in the cereal aisle staring blankly at a box of the granola Melissa used to eat when someone called my name. Jason? Oh my God, it is you. I turned to see Claire Hudson, Melissa's younger sister, standing there with a basket over her arm, looking at me with genuine concern. Where Melissa was all polished edges and calculated charm, Claire had always been the authentic one. Warm brown eyes that crinkled when she laughed, chestnut hair usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, and a directness that sometimes bordered on bluntness. We'd always gotten along during family gatherings, sharing quiet jokes while Melissa commanded the room's attention. Hey, Claire. I managed, attempting a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. Her eyes softened. You look terrible. I laughed despite myself. That characteristic Claire honesty. Thanks. I feel worse. She shifted uncomfortably. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Not your fault, I said automatically. Still, she hesitated, then spoke with quiet intensity. What she did was wrong, Jason. And what she said to you? Claire shook her head, disgust evident in her expression. That wasn't okay. I felt a crack in my carefully constructed numbness. Someone else acknowledging the cruelty of Melissa's words made them suddenly, achingly real again. To my horror, I felt my eyes welling up in the middle of the cereal aisle. Hey, Claire said gently, touching my arm. Let me buy you a coffee. You look like you could use someone to talk to. Under normal circumstances, I would have declined. Spending time with my ex's sister seemed like an exercise in emotional self-flagellation, but something in Claire's genuine concern broke through my isolation. I nodded, abandoning my half-filled shopping cart. We ended up at a small cafe 2 blocks away, where I found myself talking more than I had in weeks. Claire listened without judgment as I unpacked the devastation of discovering the affair, the shock of learning there had been others, and the hollowness that had taken residence in my chest since that night. The worst part, I admitted, staring into my cooling coffee, is that sometimes I wonder if she was right. Maybe I am boring, safe. Maybe I don't deserve better. That's bullshit, Claire said with such vehemence that an elderly woman at the next table glanced over in alarm. Sorry, she added more quietly, but it is. Melissa has always done this, torn people down to make herself feel bigger. She wasn't always like that, I said automatically. The reflexive defense of someone not yet ready to fully vilify a person they loved. Claire's expression was complicated, sadness mixed with something harder. Yeah, she was. You just couldn't see it because you loved her. But trust me, growing up with her, she trailed off, then shook her head. Look, Melissa has always been beautiful and charming and the center of attention. But she's also always been insecure in ways she'd never admit. She needs constant validation, and when someone stops providing it exactly how she wants it, they become disposable. I finished. Exactly. Claire studied me for a moment. You're a good man, Jason. Loyal, thoughtful, kind. Those aren't boring qualities, they're rare ones. Melissa didn't deserve them. Our coffee stretched into dinner at the restaurant next door, where conversation shifted from my failed relationship to more general topics. I learned that Claire had recently been promoted at the architectural firm where she worked, that she'd moved to a new apartment closer to downtown, that she was taking Spanish classes twice a week. I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks as she recounted a disastrous date with a man who spent the entire evening talking about his extensive collection of vintage dental tools. When we finally parted ways outside the restaurant, Claire hesitated before giving me a quick hug. Don't be a stranger, okay? Just because you and Melissa are done doesn't mean you have to disappear. I nodded, surprised to find I meant it when I said, I'd like that. That night, I slept without dreaming of Melissa for the first time since everything fell apart. Claire and I began meeting regularly. Casual lunches, occasional movies, texting about nothing in particular. It wasn't planned or calculated, it simply evolved naturally. She was easy to talk to, lacking her sister's need to dominate every conversation. Where Melissa had always treated my job in financial analysis as boring background noise to her more exciting career in PR, Claire asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers. I learned that despite their shared DNA, the Hudson sisters couldn't have been more different. Melissa had always been their parents' showpiece, homecoming queen, prom queen, sorority president, while Claire was the steady achiever whose accomplishments were often overshadowed. Melissa demanded attention. Claire earned respect. "Did she tell you why we barely speak?" Claire asked one evening, 3 months after our grocery store encounter. We were sitting on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker on as dust settled around us. "She mentioned some fight in college," I said vaguely. In truth, Melissa had rarely talked about Claire, except to make dismissive comments about her sister's more practical fashion sense or boring career choice. Claire took a sip of her wine. "That's one way to put it. The truth is, she slept with my boyfriend during my sophomore year, my first serious relationship." I stared at her, pieces suddenly clicking into place. "She never told me that." "Of course not." Claire's smile was sad. In her version, I overreacted to an innocent flirtation. In reality, I walked in on them in his apartment. The parallel to my own experience hit like a physical blow. "Claire, I'm so sorry." She shrugged, but I could see the old pain in her eyes. It was 8 years ago. But we never really recovered. Our parents always made excuses for her. Melissa was just impulsive. She didn't mean to hurt anyone. Why couldn't I forgive and forget? They couldn't bear to think their golden child would do something so deliberately cruel. "That sounds familiar," I said quietly. Claire met my eyes. "That's why I reached out to you that day in the grocery store. I know exactly what it's like to be discarded by Melissa Hudson and then told it's somehow your fault." Something shifted between us that night. A deeper understanding, a shared wound. We talked until 2 a.m., working through our respective experiences with the hurricane that was Melissa. For the first time, I felt truly understood in my grief and anger. After that evening, our friendship deepened quickly. Claire introduced me to her social circle, a warm, unpretentious group so different from the status-conscious friends Melissa had cultivated. I helped Claire assemble furniture for her new apartment and troubleshoot issues with her temperamental car. We developed inside jokes, favorite restaurants, movie night traditions. 4 months after our cafe conversation, I realized with startling clarity that I hadn't thought about Melissa in days. The constant ache had faded to an occasional twinge. The "you'll never do better" tape that had played relentlessly in my head had finally quieted. It happened so gradually that I didn't recognize it at first. The way my heart rate picked up when Claire texted, how I found myself smiling whenever she entered a room, the deepening urge to reach for her hand. I fought it, of course. Dating your ex's sister seemed like the plot of a bad romantic comedy, or worse, a calculated act of revenge. Besides, Claire had become too important to risk losing over misinterpreted feelings. So I said nothing, convinced these emotions would eventually pass. But they didn't. They grew stronger, more insistent, until they became impossible to ignore. The moment everything changed was ordinary. A rainy Saturday afternoon at her apartment, documentary playing in the background as we sorted through boxes of old books she was donating. Claire held up a tattered paperback, laughing at the melodramatic cover. "God, my teenage taste was atrocious," she said, eyes crinkling with self-deprecating humor. And just like that, I knew with absolute certainty that I was falling in love with her. Not because she was Melissa's sister, not as some subconscious revenge, but because she was Claire, kind, genuine, funny Claire, who had become the best part of my life without either of us noticing. The realization must have shown on my face because her laughter faded. "What is it? Do I have something on my face?" "No," I said, heart hammering. I need to tell you something, and it might mess everything up." Her expression grew serious. "You can tell me anything, Jason." I took a deep breath. "I think I'm falling for you. And not in a rebound way or a getting back at Melissa way. In a real way that terrifies me because your friendship is too important to lose." Claire went very still, her eyes searching mine. The silence stretched until I was certain I'd made a catastrophic mistake. "Say something," I finally whispered. "Even if it's that I should leave. I've been fighting the same feelings," she said quietly, "and asking myself the same questions. Is this real? Is it wrong? Would people think I betrayed my sister or that you're using me for revenge?" Hope flared in my chest. "And what answers did you come up with?" "That I've never felt this comfortable with anyone before. That when I'm not with you, I'm thinking about when I'll see you next. That whatever this is, it started as friendship and grew into something more genuine than anything I've experienced." She set down the book she'd been holding. But I'm scared too, Jason. This could get messy in so many ways. I moved closer, cautiously taking her hand. I know. But I also know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with Melissa. You're not a replacement or a consolation prize or revenge. You're Claire. And that's... I struggled to find the right words. That's everything. Her fingers tightened around mine, and she leaned forward until our foreheads touched. We'd have to take it slow, she whispered. Really slow. I can do slow. I promised. I'd wait as long as you needed. When we finally kissed, there was none of the desperate passion I'd shared with Melissa. Instead, there was something steadier, warmer, more certain. Like coming home to a place I'd been searching for without realizing it. We did take it slow, navigating the complicated territory with careful deliberation. We didn't tell anyone for the first month, wanting to ensure our feelings were genuine before facing the inevitable reactions. Claire was particularly anxious about her parents, who had always favored Melissa and might view our relationship as a betrayal regardless of the circumstances. They still don't fully believe what she did to me in college, Claire explained one night, curled against my side on her couch. They certainly won't understand this. We don't have to tell them until you're ready, I assured her, though the secrecy sometimes felt uncomfortably like we were doing something wrong. When we finally did start telling friends, reactions were mixed. My closest friends were supportive after their initial surprise, having witnessed firsthand how devastated I'd been after Melissa's betrayal. They could see the positive change in me since Claire had entered my life. You're you again, my friend Derek said simply. But a better version. Claire's friends were more cautious, protective of her, and concerned that she might be setting herself up for heartbreak. But as weeks turned to months and they saw us together, saw the mutual respect, the genuine affection, the easy compatibility, even the most skeptical came around. 6 months into our relationship, we were having dinner at my apartment when Claire set down her fork with unusual solemnity. I ran into Melissa today, she said. My stomach dropped. Despite living in the same city, we'd managed to avoid any encounters with her since our relationship began. Where? Coffee shop near my office. She was with some guy, very polished, expensive watch, laughing too loudly at everything she said. Claire's description painted a picture I knew all too well. She spotted me before I could leave. I reached for her hand across the table. What happened? She was Melissa. Claire's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. All fake sweetness and backhanded comments. Asked about my little architectural projects and whether I'd finally updated my wardrobe. Then she spotted this. She touched the simple silver bracelet I'd given her for her birthday. Asked where I got it. I told her it was a gift. Did you tell her who from? I asked, my throat tight. No. But then she asked about you. Said she'd heard through mutual friends that you were seeing someone new. Wanted to know if it was anyone with potential or if you'd settled for someone more your speed. Anger flashed through me. Not the raw, uncontrolled rage I'd felt immediately after Melissa's betrayal, but something colder and more focused. What did you say? Nothing at first. I was too shocked by her attitude, like she still owned you somehow. Claire's eyes met mine. Then I realized something important. She wasn't asking because she misses you. She was asking because she needs to believe you're worse off without her. Her ego requires it. The insight was so accurate it took my breath away. That sounds exactly like her. So I told her the truth, that you were seeing someone who appreciates your kindness, your intelligence, your quiet strength, someone who thinks you're the most remarkable man they've ever known. Warmth spread through my chest. You said all that? I did. Claire squeezed my hand, and then she got this look on her face, like she'd tasted something sour. Asked if I was in contact with you. I said yes. She demanded to know how serious your new relationship was. And I prompted, sensing there was more. Claire's expression was a mix of defiance and uncertainty. I told her it was very serious, that I'd never seen two people more right for each other. That's true, I said softly. Then she asked who this perfect woman was. Claire took a deep breath. And I told her. I said, it's me, Melissa. Jason and I are together, and it's the healthiest, most honest relationship either of us has ever had. I felt a complex surge of emotions, concern for Claire, pride in her courage, and an undeniable flicker of satisfaction at Melissa finally learning the truth. How did she react? She went white, then red, called me a backstabbing bitch, said we were obviously doing this to hurt her, that we were both pathetic and deserved each other. Claire's voice wavered slightly. Then she said she'd make sure our parents knew what kind of daughter they really had. I moved around the table and pulled Claire into my arms. I'm sorry. I never wanted to come between you and your family. You didn't, she said firmly, looking up at me. Melissa did that years ago. I'm done letting her control my life through guilt and manipulation. Her hands framed my face. I meant every word I said to her. What we have is real, Jason. It's not about her. It never was. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I wanted to spend my life with Claire Hudson. Not as revenge against her sister, but because she had helped me discover what genuine love actually felt like. Supportive, accepting, growth encouraging rather than diminishing. When Melissa called me the next day, I was prepared. I answered calmly, listening as she unleashed a torrent of accusations and insults. She called me pathetic, claimed I was using her sister to get back at her, insisted our relationship was proof of my obsession with her. Are you finished? I asked when she finally paused for breath. Excuse me? Her voice rose an octave in indignation. I asked if you're finished, because I have something to say, and I'm only going to say it once. I kept my tone measured, refusing to give her the emotional reaction she was seeking. What you did hurt me deeply, not just the cheating, but the casual cruelty afterward. For months, I believed what you said about me, that I was boring, undeserving, that I'd never find someone who truly valued me. Well, clearly, I'm not done, I interrupted. Claire and I didn't happen because of you. We happened despite you. She saw me at my lowest and showed me kindness without agenda. We built a friendship that grew into something neither of us expected, but both of us cherish. And the irony is, if you hadn't been so needlessly cruel that night, I might never have discovered what a healthy relationship actually feels like. There was silence on the other end. You told me I'd never do better than you, Melissa. You were wrong. I found someone who makes me want to be better every day, who supports my dreams instead of diminishing them, who loves me for exactly who I am rather than who she wishes I would be. I took a deep breath. I'm not with Claire to hurt you. I'm with her because I'm in love with her. The fact that she's your sister is unfortunate timing, nothing more. You expect me to believe that? Melissa spat, but I could hear the uncertainty beneath her anger. I don't particularly care what you believe. I replied honestly. I'm not living my life for your approval anymore. Claire and I are building something real together, and nothing you say or do can change that. My parents will never accept this, she threatened. They'll see it for the sick revenge plot it is. That's between Claire and your parents. But for what it's worth, I plan to do everything in my power to show them exactly how much I respect and adore their daughter. Their second daughter, who deserves far better than the shadow you've kept her in. I ended the call while she was still sputtering replies, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Melissa had been right about one thing. Her parents were indeed horrified when they learned about our relationship. They refused to see Claire for weeks, convinced we had formed a relationship specifically to hurt Melissa. It was a difficult time for Claire, who despite years of living in her sister's shadow, still desperately wanted her parents' approval. We weathered it together, supporting each other through uncomfortable family dinners, where her parents were coldly civil to me, through tearful phone calls where they tried to convince Claire she was making a terrible mistake, through Melissa's strategic character assassination campaign among extended family members. Through it all, our relationship only strengthened. Where Melissa and I had been a volatile mix of passion and insecurity, Claire and I built something steadier and more enduring. We communicated openly, respected each other's independence, celebrated each other's successes without competition. I found myself becoming more confident, more willing to take the risks Melissa had always claimed I was incapable of. Claire blossomed too, pursuing projects at work that she'd previously hesitated to take on, standing up to her parents in ways she never had before. 9 months after we began dating, 15 months after that devastating night when Melissa had torn my life apart, I took Claire to the botanical gardens where we'd had one of our first unofficial dates. As we stood beneath a canopy of spring blossoms, I dropped to one knee and presented her with a ring that bore no resemblance to the practical solitaire I'd once chosen for her sister. This was a unique vintage piece we'd admired together in an antique shop months earlier. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by intricate filigree work. Claire Hudson, I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I love you for your kindness, your strength, your integrity, and 1,000 other qualities I discover every day. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and accepted. Will you marry me? Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded emphatically. pulling me to my feet and into her arms. Yes, she whispered against my lips. 1,000 times yes. As I slid the ring onto her finger, I felt the last pieces of my old life. The insecurities, the lingering doubts, the echo of Melissa's cruel words finally fall away. In their place was something I'd never expected to find. Not revenge, but redemption. Not the satisfaction of proving Melissa wrong, but the deeper joy of discovering she had never been right about me in the first place. We knew the engagement would cause another wave of family drama, but we faced it together, secure in the knowledge that what we had built was genuine. Slowly, Claire's parents began to see the truth of our relationship. The turning point came at a tense family dinner 3 weeks after our engagement, when her father finally asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "I need to know," he said, setting down his fork and looking directly at me. "Was this?" He gestured between Claire and me. "Was this all about getting back at Melissa?" Before I could answer, Claire spoke up. "Dad, I need you to listen carefully. Jason and I didn't choose this timing. We fought our feelings for months because we were worried about exactly what you're suggesting. But what we have isn't about Melissa. It never was. Then what is it about?" Her mother asked, genuine confusion in her expression. I took Claire's hand. "It's about finding someone who makes you better instead of smaller. Someone who celebrates your strengths instead of exploiting your insecurities." I looked at Claire, seeing my future reflected in her warm eyes. Someone who loves you exactly as you are, but inspires you to become more than you ever thought possible. Her father studied us for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you," he said finally, "and I'm sorry it's taken us this long to see it." The wedding was small but joyful, held in a garden venue with fairy lights strung through the trees and music drifting through the evening air. Claire was radiant in a simple gown that perfectly captured her unpretentious elegance. As we exchanged vows, I looked into the eyes of the woman who had helped me rebuild from the ashes of heartbreak and felt nothing but gratitude for the painful path that had led me to her. Melissa declined her invitation, of course, but her absence was merely a footnote to our happiness, not a defining factor. In the end, the best revenge wasn't marrying her sister or proving her wrong. It was finding a love so genuine that the pain she caused became nothing more than the prologue to a much better story. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its cruelest blows. Sometimes the words meant to destroy us, "You'll never do better than me," become the catalyst for discovering just how wrong they were. And sometimes when you're least expecting it, you find yourself standing exactly where you were always meant to be, beside someone who helps you understand why everything else had to fall apart first. Claire and I have been married for 2 years now. We bought a house with a garden where she can indulge her newfound passion for growing vegetables. I started my own financial consulting firm, taking the entrepreneurial risk Melissa always insisted I was too cautious to attempt. We're talking about starting a family soon, building on the strong foundation we've created together. Last month, we ran into Melissa at a restaurant downtown. She was alone, scrolling through her phone while waiting for a table. Her eyes widened when she spotted us, a complicated expression crossing her face. Recognition, surprise, and something that might have been regret. For a moment, we all just looked at each other, the past hanging between us like an invisible thread. Then Claire took my hand, her thumb brushing over my wedding ring in that unconscious gesture of connection she often makes. I smiled down at my wife, this remarkable woman who had seen value in me when I couldn't see it myself, and felt nothing but peace. "Ready to go home?" I asked her softly. Claire nodded, her eyes reflecting the contentment I felt. As we walked past Melissa's table, I nodded politely but didn't stop. There was nothing left to say, no scores to settle, no points to prove. We'd both moved on to lives that no longer revolved around her approval or disapproval. Outside in the cool evening air, Claire looked up at me. "Are you okay?" I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I'm better than okay." I told her honestly, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." And I was, not because I'd married my ex's sister as some elaborate revenge plot, but because cruel twists of fate sometimes lead us exactly where we need to go. Because sometimes the words meant to break us, "You'll never do better," become the challenge that helps us find something far greater than we ever imagined possible. Sometimes, just sometimes, heartbreak is merely the beginning of a much better story. The night of our wedding, after all the guests had gone home, and we'd retreated to our hotel suite overlooking the city, Claire and I stood on the balcony sharing a bottle of champagne. The October air carried a hint of the coming winter, but wrapped in each other's arms, I felt nothing but warmth. "Mrs. Sibwarns, Claire Bennett, I whispered against her hair, testing the sound of her new name. How does it feel? She smiled up at me, her eyes reflecting the city lights. Like the beginning of the best chapter yet. We'd chosen not to take an immediate honeymoon, instead planning a longer trip for the following spring when Claire's work schedule would allow for extended time away. That night, though, felt like its own kind of paradise. A quiet celebration of everything we'd overcome to reach this moment. Later, as Claire slept curled against my side, I found myself wide awake, overwhelmed by a profound gratitude for the twisted path that had led me here. 2 years earlier, I'd stood in another bedroom, watching my world collapse as Melissa's betrayal unfolded before my eyes. Now I was married to a woman who embodied everything I'd ever wanted, but hadn't known to look for. Integrity, compassion, genuine partnership. Life has a way of circling back with strange symmetry. The morning after our wedding, as we were enjoying room service breakfast, Claire's phone rang. Her expression shifted as she checked the screen. "It's Melissa," she said, surprise evident in her voice. We exchanged a glance. Melissa had declined our wedding invitation with a curt RSVP card, offering neither congratulations nor explanation. Her absence had been a relief, removing the one potential source of tension from our celebration. Claire hesitated, then answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Hello? So you actually went through with it?" Melissa's voice filled the room, carrying that familiar blend of disdain and forced casualness. "Mom sent me pictures." I watched Claire's shoulders tense, then deliberately relax. We'd worked hard on setting boundaries, on not allowing Melissa's barbs to penetrate our happiness. "Yes, we did," Claire replied evenly. "It was a beautiful day. I'm sure it was very quaint," Melissa said, the pause perfectly calculated to sting. "Though I have to say, that dress was an interesting choice. Very simple." I reached across the table to squeeze Claire's hand, silently reminding her of our agreement not to engage with Melissa's provocations. Claire had chosen her elegant sheath dress specifically because it reflected her own taste, rather than the elaborate princess gown Melissa had once insisted would be the only appropriate option for a Hudson daughter. "Was there something you needed, Melissa?" Claire asked, redirecting the conversation. A brief silence then. "Actually, yes. I'm moving back into the city next month. Got offered a director position at Leland & Price. She named one of the most prestigious PR firms in the region, her tone making it clear we should be impressed. I'll need some help with the transition. Maybe Jason could lend a hand, considering his history of being useful." My jaw tightened. Even after everything, Melissa still viewed me as a resource to be tapped, a practical asset rather than a person with his own agency. "We're actually heading out of town for a few days." Claire lied smoothly. "And when we get back, we're focused on setting up our new place. But congratulations on the job. That's quite an achievement." The graceful deflection was pure Claire, acknowledging Melissa's announcement without engaging with her request, maintaining politeness without yielding ground. "Right," Melissa replied, her disappointment barely concealed. "Well, I'm sure I'll see you both around. The city's not that big after all." After she hung up, Claire set down her phone with a sigh. "She'll never change, will she?" "Probably not," I agreed, moving to stand behind her chair, my hands resting on her shoulders. "But we have." That call was our first indication that our hard-won peace might face new challenges. Melissa moving back to the city meant increased chances of uncomfortable encounters, of boundary-testing interactions, of the past intruding on our present. What we didn't realize was how those intrusions would ultimately strengthen rather than weaken what we were building. Our first year of marriage unfolded with the kind of ordinary magic that comes from sharing your life with your best friend. We bought a 1920s craftsman-style house in a quiet neighborhood, spending weekends stripping old wallpaper and refinishing hardwood floors. Claire designed a home office for my growing consulting business, while I built her raised garden beds in the backyard. We hosted dinner parties for friends, established Sunday morning coffee traditions, bickered about dishwasher loading techniques, and made love in every room of our new home. It wasn't perfect. Nothing real ever is. Claire's tendency toward perfectionism sometimes clashed with my more relaxed approach to household management. My workaholic streaks occasionally led to distracted conversations that left her feeling unheard. But unlike in my relationship with Melissa, these conflicts became opportunities for growth rather than weapons for control. "I need you to understand why this matters to me," Claire said one night after I'd dismissed her concerns about a leaking faucet as something we could deal with eventually. We sat at our kitchen table, mugs of tea between us as she explained how growing up with parents who prioritized appearances over substance had left her with a deep need for problems to be addressed directly rather than papered over. I listened, really listened, and found myself understanding her in a new way. "I'm sorry," I told her, reaching for her hand. "I wasn't seeing it from your perspective. We'll call the plumber tomorrow." These small moments of misalignment and reconnection strengthened us, teaching us how to bend without breaking, how to disagree without diminishing each other. As Claire predicted, her parents gradually warmed to our relationship as they witnessed the genuine happiness we shared. Her father began calling me for advice on investment matters. Her mother invited us for weekend visits with increasing frequency. The shadow of Melissa's influence over them seemed to recede as they formed their own relationships with us as a couple. The first real test came 6 months into our marriage, at Claire's cousin Amy's engagement party. It was the first family event Melissa would attend since our wedding, and tension hummed beneath the surface as we drove to the upscale restaurant where the celebration would be held. "We'll be fine," I assured Claire, noting the way her fingers tapped nervously against her thigh. "We're not going to let her affect us, remember?" Claire nodded, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know. It's just, she has this way of making me feel 16 again, always inadequate, always in her shadow." I pulled into the parking lot and turned to face her. "Hey," I said softly, taking her face in my hands. "You are remarkable, Claire Bennett. Brilliant, kind, stronger than you know. Nothing she says or does changes that truth." The vulnerability in her expression shifted to determination. "You're right. Let's do this." Melissa was already holding court when we entered, surrounded by a cluster of admirers as she regaled them with stories of her new executive position. She looked up as we approached, her practiced smile freezing for just a moment before regaining its brilliance. "Claire! Jason! How lovely to see you both." She air-kissed Claire's cheek, her gaze sweeping over her sister's outfit with calculated assessment. "That color is much better on you than I would have expected." I felt Claire stiffen beside me but watched with pride as she merely smiled. "Thanks, Melissa. Congratulations on settling into your new role. Mom mentioned you're enjoying it." "It's challenging but rewarding," Melissa replied, subtly adjusting her posture to highlight the expensive watch adorning her wrist. "The company values true innovation, which is refreshing. Not everyone understands what that means, of course." The implied criticism hung in the air, but neither Claire nor I rose to the bait. Instead, I placed my hand at the small of Claire's back and said, "We should congratulate Amy and Tyler." "It was good seeing you, Melissa." As we moved away, I heard Claire exhale slowly. "Round one survived," she murmured. The evening progressed with a careful dance of polite interactions and strategic positioning to maintain distance from Melissa. We were deep in conversation with Claire's uncle when I felt a presence at my shoulder and turned to find Melissa standing there, champagne flute in hand. "Jason, would you mind helping me for a moment?" she asked, her voice pitched to carry just enough sincerity to make refusal seem churlish. "There's a bottle of wine Amy's parents brought back from Italy, and I promised to open it, but the cork is being stubborn." Before I could respond, Claire smiled tightly. "I'm sure one of the servers would be happy to help with that, Melissa." "Oh, but Jason has such capable hands," Melissa replied, her gaze holding mine a beat too long. "He always was good at opening things." The double entendre wasn't subtle, and I felt a flash of anger at her deliberate attempt to create tension. Claire's uncle, sensing the undercurrent, excused himself hastily. "I'll come help," I said, squeezing Claire's hand reassuringly. "Back in a minute." As Melissa led me toward a side room off the main dining area, I maintained a careful distance, already regretting my decision. The moment we were out of earshot of other guests, she turned to face me, no bottle in sight. "You know, I've been thinking about us lately," she said, stepping closer. "About what went wrong." I took a deliberate step back. "There is no us to think about, Melissa. There hasn't been for a long time." "Don't be like that," she pouted, the expression so familiar it sent an uncomfortable flicker of déjà vu through me. "We had something real before things got complicated." "We had something," I agreed. "But it wasn't real. Not on your end, anyway." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And what you have with my sister is, please, we both know what that relationship really is." "Yes, we do," I replied calmly. "It's honest, supportive, based on mutual respect. Everything we never had. So self-righteous." She scoffed, moving toward me again. "Tell me something, Jason. When you're with her, do you ever think of me? Do you compare us?" "I bet you do." I felt a surge of clarity, seeing through her tactics with a precision that would have been impossible during our relationship. "That's the difference between then and now, Melissa. I don't think about you at all." The words hit their mark. I watched her confidence flicker, replaced briefly by genuine hurt before her mask slipped back into place. "You're lying to yourself," she said, her voice hardening. "This wholesome act with Claire, this perfect little life you're pretending to have, it won't last. You'll get bored or she will. Deep down, you both know this relationship was built on revenge and jealousy." I shook my head, feeling only pity where once her words would have left me defensive and raw. "I'm sorry you see it that way. But your opinion stopped mattering to me the night you said I'd never do better than you. You weren't just wrong about me. You were wrong about your sister too. Claire isn't your shadow or your competitor. She never was. She's her own light." I turned to leave, but Melissa's voice stopped me at the doorway. "She'll never make you feel the way I did," she said, a final attempt to penetrate my defenses. "Never." I looked back at her, standing alone in the dimly lit room, still beautiful, but somehow diminished by her own bitterness. "Thank God for that," I said quietly and walked away. When I returned to Claire, I could see the question in her eyes, a hint of the old insecurity Melissa had always been expert at triggering. I led her out onto the restaurant's small balcony where we could speak privately. "There was no wine bottle," I said simply. Claire nodded, unsurprised. "What did she want?" "To prove she still has power over us." "Over me." I took both her hands in mine. "She doesn't." The relief in Claire's expression was immediate and profound. "What did you say to her?" "I told her the truth, that what we have is real, and that her opinion stopped mattering to me a long time ago." I drew her closer. "I also told her that you're not her shadow. You're your own light." Claire's eyes glistened, and she pressed her forehead against my chest. "I've spent my whole life feeling like I'm standing in her spotlight, trying to be seen." "I see you," I whispered against her hair. "I've always seen you." When we rejoined the party, something had shifted. Claire stood taller, laughed more freely, no longer scanning the room for her sister's reaction to her every move. When Melissa eventually approached us again, her smile tight and her eyes calculating, Claire met her gaze with steady confidence. "You two seem very settled," Melissa observed, her tone making it sound like an affliction. "Very domestic." "We are," Claire agreed, her hand finding mine. "It suits us." Melissa's gaze flicked between us, searching for a crack in our unity. "Well, that's nice. Predictable, but nice." She focused on me. "I always said Jason was the settling down type. Safe, reliable, uncomplicated." Once those words would have cut deep, reinforcing the insecurities she'd carefully cultivated during our relationship. Now they fell flat, revealing more about her than about me. "You know what I've learned, Melissa?" I said, my tone conversational rather than confrontational. "The people who constantly chase excitement are often running from themselves. Real happiness isn't about drama or novelty. It's about finding peace with who you are and sharing that authentic self with someone who values it." Her smile faltered, a flash of recognition crossing her face before she masked it with a laugh. "Always so philosophical. Anyway, I should circulate. Important connections to maintain, you know. Enjoy your contentment." As she walked away, Claire leaned against me. "That was incredible," she murmured. "You didn't get defensive or angry. You just saw through her." "I had a good teacher," I replied, kissing her temple. "You've been seeing through her manipulations for years." That night marked a turning point in our relationship with Melissa. While she didn't stop her occasional attempts to create tension, the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. We were no longer reacting to her provocations, but responding from a place of security in our own truth. Over the following months, we settled deeper into our life together. Claire received a significant promotion at her architectural firm, becoming the youngest partner in the company's history. My consulting business grew steadily, allowing me to hire 2 associates and move into proper office space downtown. We traveled to Portugal for the delayed honeymoon we'd promised ourselves, spending 3 weeks exploring coastal villages and historic cities, making love in sun-drenched hotel rooms, and planning our future over bottles of local wine. It was during this trip that we decided to start trying for a baby, a conversation that evolved naturally as we watched a young family playing on the beach one golden afternoon. "They make it look so easy," Claire observed, her eyes following the father as he chased his laughing toddler in circles at the water's edge. "I'm sure it's not," I replied, "but it looks worth it." She turned to me, her expression suddenly serious. "Do you think we'd be good at it? Parenting?" I considered the question carefully. "I think we'd make a lot of mistakes like everyone does. But I also think we'd love our child without conditions, support them without control, and create a home where they feel safe to become whoever they're meant to be." Claire's eyes grew bright. That's exactly what I want to give a child. Everything I had and everything I didn't. Then let's do it, I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. Let's start our family. Her smile was radiant as she moved into my arms. You know it might not happen right away, she cautioned, ever the practical one. And the timing with my partnership is not ideal. Claire, I interrupted gently. There's never a perfect time for the most important things in life. We'll figure it out together, like we always do. We returned from Portugal with renewed purpose, approaching this new goal with the same blend of enthusiasm and thoughtfulness that characterized our approach to everything. Claire scheduled a checkup with her doctor, I researched the best prenatal vitamins, and we both made lifestyle adjustments. Less alcohol, more sleep, regular exercise. What we didn't anticipate was how this decision would affect our interactions with Claire's family, particularly her parents. When we shared our plans over dinner at their home, Claire's mother, Martha, clasped her hands in delight. A grandchild. Oh, this is wonderful news, she exclaimed, then immediately launched into a detailed account of the Hudson family's fertility history. The women in our family are usually very fertile. I got pregnant with Melissa on our honeymoon, you know. Claire shot me a quick look of amusement at her mother's characteristic lack of filter. Have you told your sister yet? Claire's father, Robert, asked, his tone carefully neutral. Claire shook her head. We're just starting to try, Dad. There's nothing to tell yet. Well, she should hear it from you before someone else mentions it, he advised. You know how sensitive she can be about family matters. The unspoken subtext hung in the air. Melissa, at 36, remained unmarried and had recently ended another relationship that had seemed promising. Her biological clock was a topic she avoided with uncharacteristic intensity. We'll tell her when there's actually news to share, I said firmly, putting an end to the discussion. Later that night, as we prepared for bed, Claire brought up a concern that had clearly been simmering since our conversation with her parents. Do you think they're right? Should we give Melissa a heads up that we're trying? I considered the question, wanting to be fair but also protective of our privacy. I don't think we owe anyone information about our reproductive choices, I said carefully. Even family. Claire sighed, sitting on the edge of our bed. I know, but I can imagine how I'd feel, hearing through the grapevine that she was pregnant before she told me directly. Even with our history, that would hurt. Her compassion, even towards someone who had caused her so much pain, was one of the qualities I loved most about her. Then we'll tell her ourselves when the time is right. Not because we're obligated, but because you want to approach this with kindness. Claire smiled, relief evident in her expression. Thank you for understanding. Always, I promised, joining her on the bed and pulling her close. Now, should we practice this baby-making business a bit more? Just to be sure we're doing it right? Her laughter was the most beautiful sound in the world. Our journey toward parenthood turned out to be more complicated than we'd anticipated. 3 months of careful timing and hopeful waiting yielded nothing but disappointment. 6 months in, Claire's doctor suggested some preliminary tests for both of us. While my results came back normal, Claire was diagnosed with endometriosis, a condition that could make conception more difficult. It doesn't mean we can't have children, the doctor assured us during a follow-up appointment. It just means it might take longer, and we might need some medical assistance along the way. Claire nodded, her expression composed, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Later that night, she broke down in our bathroom, shoulders shaking with silent sobs as I held her. What if I can't give you children? She whispered, voicing her deepest fear. What if that's not part of our story? I cradled her face in my hands, making sure she could see the absolute certainty in my eyes. Then we'll write a different chapter. Claire, I didn't marry you for the children you might bear. I married you for who you are. If our family is just the two of us, that's still a family worth celebrating. She leaned into me, her breath warm against my neck. I want this so much, she admitted. I want to see you holding our baby, want to know what it feels like to create life with you. Then we'll keep trying, I promised. Whatever it takes. What followed was a year of increasing medical interventions. Fertility drugs that made Claire emotional and bloated. Scheduled intimacy that sometimes felt more clinical than romantic. Monthly disappointments that tested our optimism. Through it all, we held on to each other, finding moments of joy and connection amidst the stress. We debated whether to share our struggles with family and friends, eventually deciding to confide in only a few close confidants. Claire was adamant that her sister not be among them. Melissa would find a way to make this about her, she explained when I questioned the decision. She'd either pity me in that condescending way of hers, or she'd somehow use it as proof that she's the superior Hudson daughter after all. I didn't argue, recognizing the truth in her assessment. Despite our progress in establishing healthier boundaries with Melissa, some wounds were still too tender to expose to her potential judgment. As our fertility journey stretched into its second year, other aspects of our lives continued to evolve. Claire's architectural firm won a prestigious contract to design a new performing arts center downtown, putting her at the helm of the most significant project of her career. My business expanded to include wealth management services, necessitating a move to larger offices and the hiring of additional staff. We were sitting in our backyard garden one Sunday morning, enjoying the rare leisure of unscheduled time, when Claire set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice measured in that way that told me she'd been rehearsing this conversation in her head. "Maybe we should take a break from the fertility treatments." I studied her face, noting the mix of resignation and relief in her expression. "You're sure?" She nodded, reaching for my hand. "The medication is affecting my work, my mood, our relationship. I'm tired of our life revolving around clinic appointments and ovulation calendars. I'm tired of feeling like a failure every month." "You could never be a failure," I said fiercely, squeezing her fingers. "Not to me. I know." Her smile was soft, tinged with sadness, but also resolution. "That's why I think we should step back, refocus on us for a while. Maybe look into other options down the road. Adoption, surrogacy. But for now, I need to remember who we are beyond this struggle." The decision brought a complex mix of emotions: grief for the biological children we might never have, relief from the constant pressure of trying, uncertainty about our future path to parenthood. But it also brought a renewed appreciation for what we did have: each other, our health, careers we found fulfilling, a home we'd made together. We rediscovered the spontaneity that fertility treatments had suppressed, taking weekend trips without consulting ovulation calendars, making love because we wanted to, rather than because the timing was optimal, staying up late talking about dreams and fears beyond parenthood. It was during this period of recalibration that we received an unexpected invitation, an embossed card requesting our presence at the engagement party of Melissa Hudson and Gregory Westfield, a prominent real estate developer, 20 years her senior. "Are you going to go?" my friend Derek asked when I mentioned it over lunch. "Seems like it could be awkward." I shrugged, still uncertain myself. "Claire thinks we should. Says it's an olive branch of sorts from Melissa." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Or a chance to showcase her rich fiancé and make you both uncomfortable." "Maybe both," I admitted. "But Claire feels like declining might seem petty." "And what do you think?" I considered the question carefully. I don't care anymore. Truly. Whether Melissa's invitation is sincere or strategic doesn't affect our lives either way." Derek nodded approvingly. "You've come a long way from the guy who used to analyze Melissa's every text message for hidden meanings." "That guy died the night she cheated on me," I said simply. Best thing that ever happened to him in retrospect. We decided to attend the engagement party, more out of support for Claire's parents than any desire to celebrate Melissa's relationship. The event was held at an exclusive country club, with champagne fountains and ice sculptures announcing Gregory's wealth more effectively than any verbal declaration could have. Melissa greeted us with practiced charm, her fiancé's hand possessively at her waist. Gregory was distinguished looking, with silver hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to getting his way. He seemed genuinely smitten with Melissa, his eyes rarely leaving her as she worked the room. "Claire, Jason, I'm so glad you could make it," Melissa said, air-kissing Claire's cheek. "Gregory, this is my sister Claire and her husband Jason." Gregory shook our hands firmly. "Melissa speaks of you often," he said, though his tone suggested those mentions might not have been entirely positive. "Congratulations to you both," Claire said warmly, always the gracious one. "The ring is beautiful." Melissa extended her hand, showcasing a diamond that bordered on ostentatious. "Gregory designed it himself. He has excellent taste, doesn't he?" The conversation continued with pleasant superficiality until Gregory was pulled away by business associates, leaving the three of us in a momentary bubble of shared history. "He seems devoted," I offered, searching for something positive to say. "He is," Melissa confirmed, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. "It's refreshing to be with someone who prioritizes my happiness above everything else." The implied criticism wasn't lost on either of us, but Claire merely smiled. "That's important in a relationship. We're happy for you, Melissa." Truly. Something flickered in Melissa's expression, surprised perhaps at the genuine goodwill in Claire's voice. "Thank you," she said with unusual sincerity. Then after a hesitation, "How are you two? Mom mentioned you were thinking about starting a family at some point." I felt Claire tense beside me and placed a protective hand at the small of her back. "We're taking things as they come," I replied neutrally, both focused on our careers at the moment. Melissa's gaze lingered on Claire's face, seeing something there that made her uncharacteristically gentle. "Well, there's no rush. Though I imagine you'd make wonderful parents." The unexpected kindness caught us both off guard. Claire blinked rapidly, emotion breaking through her careful composure. "That's... Thank you." An awkward silence fell, filled with all the things we weren't saying, about pain and forgiveness, about choices and consequences, about the strange turns life takes when you least expect them. "I should check on Gregory," Melissa said finally. "But I'm glad you came tonight." As she walked away, Claire leaned against me, exhaling slowly. "That was almost like talking to the sister I used to have," she murmured. "Before everything got so complicated, maybe getting engaged to a billionaire has mellowed her," I suggested, only half joking. Claire smiled wryly. "Or maybe she's finally found what she's been looking for all this time." "And what's that?" "Someone who makes her feel like she's enough," Claire said softly. "That's all she ever wanted, I think." The insight struck me as profoundly true. That beneath Melissa's manipulation and cruelty had always been a desperate fear of inadequacy, a hunger for validation that no amount of external success could satisfy. In that moment, I felt the last tendrils of resentment toward her finally release their hold on my heart. "You know what?" I said, pulling Claire closer. "I hope she has found that. Everyone deserves to feel enough." "Even Melissa?" Claire asked, her eyes searching mine. "Even Melissa," I confirmed. "Though I'm still glad she cheated on me." Claire laughed, the sound bright against the murmur of party conversation. "That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "Just wait until we get home," I promised. "I'll show you romantic." The night of Melissa's engagement party marked another turning point in our complicated family dynamics. While we didn't suddenly become close with her, there was a noticeable thawing in our interactions. When Melissa and Gregory announced they would marry in Tuscany 6 months later, their invitation to us seemed genuinely inclusive, rather than obligatory. "Should we go?" Claire asked as we discussed the invitation over dinner. "It's a long way to travel for a relationship we're still cautious about." I considered the question thoughtfully. "One night, what does your instinct tell you?" She twirled pasta around her fork, contemplating. "That it matters to my parents. That it might be an opportunity for healing. That Melissa seems different with Gregory. Less competitive, more secure." "All good points," I acknowledged. "But what do you want?" Claire set down her fork. "I want to be the bigger person," she admitted. "But I also want to protect our peace, our happiness. And I'm not sure a week in Tuscany with Melissa as the center of attention is the best way to do that." I reached across the table to take her hand. "What if we compromise? We attend the ceremony, stay for 2 days of the festivities, then take our own side trip, maybe to that coastal town you've been wanting to paint. Make it our vacation, not just their wedding." Her smile was immediate and grateful. "That sounds perfect." The gesture without the extended performance. "It's settled then," I said, lifting my wine glass in a toast. "To new boundaries and Italian sunshine." As it turned out, we never made it to Melissa's Tuscan wedding. 2 months before the scheduled date, Claire missed her period. After 2 years of trying, of medical interventions and disappointments, of finally accepting a different path, there it was, a positive pregnancy test on our bathroom counter. "Is this real?" Claire whispered, hands trembling as she held the plastic stick with its unmistakable double lines. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, both of us staring at the test in wonder. "We should confirm with a doctor," I said cautiously, not wanting either of us to experience more disappointment if this was somehow a false positive. The blood test confirmed what the home test had indicated. Claire was 6 weeks pregnant, having conceived naturally after we'd stopped all fertility treatments. Our doctor called it a stress paradox. Sometimes when couples stop trying so intently, their bodies finally cooperate. "It happens more often than you might think," she assured us during our first prenatal appointment. "The mind-body connection is powerful." We were cautiously ecstatic, aware of the statistics about early pregnancy loss, but unable to completely suppress our joy. When we reached the 12-week mark, we finally allowed ourselves to fully celebrate, sharing the news with our closest friends and Claire's parents. Martha Hudson wept openly when we told her, pulling Claire into a fierce embrace. "My baby is having a baby," she kept repeating, her happiness untainted by the complicated family dynamics that often colored our interactions. Robert was more restrained but equally moved, his voice gruff with emotion as he shook my hand, and then, surprising us both, pulled me into a quick hug. "You'll be a wonderful father," he said simply. The question of how to tell Melissa loomed large. Her wedding was now just 6 weeks away, and Claire was reluctant to share news that might be perceived as stealing attention from Melissa's big day. We should wait until after her wedding, she decided. Tell her when they return from their honeymoon. I agreed that the timing made sense, but fate had other plans. At Claire's 16-week appointment, we learned we were expecting twins, a discovery that explained why Claire was showing earlier than expected for a first pregnancy. The news doubled our joy, but also made concealment increasingly difficult, especially at an event like a destination wedding, where Claire would be wearing fitted dresses and swimsuits. "We have to tell her before the wedding." Claire conceded after trying on her formal dress for the ceremony and finding it already snug across her growing belly. "I don't want her to figure it out during the event and think we were trying to create drama." We arranged to meet Melissa for coffee during one of her whirlwind trips back to the city for wedding preparations. The trendy cafe she selected was crowded and noisy, perhaps not the ideal setting for such a personal conversation, but it offered a certain neutrality that seemed appropriate. Melissa arrived 15 minutes late, apologizing breezily as she slid into the booth across from us. "Wedding planners are tyrants," she declared, signaling for a server. "Absolute tyrants. I've been on the phone with Florence since 5 a.m. She ordered an elaborate coffee concoction before turning her attention fully to us, her practiced smile faltering slightly as she took in Claire's appearance. My wife was radiant in early pregnancy, her complexion glowing, her body softening in subtle ways that weren't obvious under her loose sweater, but might register to someone who knew her well. "You look different," Melissa observed, her gaze sharp. "New skincare routine." Claire glanced at me, receiving my encouraging nod, then took a deep breath. "Actually, Melissa, we wanted to talk to you before your wedding. I'm pregnant. We're having twins." The silence that followed was thick with potential energy, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Melissa's expression cycled through several emotions too quickly to identify before settling into something carefully composed. Twins," she repeated, her voice neutral. "Well, that's significant news. We just found out about the twins part," I added, my hand finding Claire's under the table. "But yes, we're due in early October." Melissa's gaze dropped to her manicured nails, then back to Claire's face. "So you'll be what, 5 months along at my wedding?" "About that," Claire confirmed. "I wanted to tell you now so you wouldn't be surprised by how I look in Tuscany. And I completely understand if you'd prefer I not be in the family photos, or if you want me to wear something different than what we originally planned." "Don't be ridiculous," Melissa interrupted, her tone sharpening before she visibly reined herself in. "You're my sister. Of course you'll be in the photos." Another silence fell, heavy with unspoken history. I watched Melissa carefully, trying to gauge whether her reaction was genuine or performance. To my surprise, what I saw in her eyes wasn't jealousy or resentment, but something more complex, perhaps a recognition of how fundamentally our lives had diverged. "I'm happy for you," she said finally, the words coming slowly as if she was discovering their truth as she spoke them. "Really, I am. You've always wanted children." Claire's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you. That means a lot." Melissa took a sip of her coffee, then set it down with deliberate care. "Gregory and I have decided not to have children. His are grown, and I've never felt that maternal pull. My career has always been my priority." There was no defensive edge to her statement, no implied criticism of Claire's choices, just a straightforward sharing of her own path. It struck me as perhaps the most honest thing I'd ever heard Melissa say. "I think it's wonderful when people know what they truly want," Claire replied, genuine warmth in her voice. "Whether that's children or career or both or neither." Melissa studied her sister for a moment, something like wonder flickering across her face. "When did you get so wise, little sister?" "Probably around the time I stopped trying to compete with you," Claire said simply. The honesty hung between them, fragile but healing. Melissa glanced at me, then back to Claire. "Are you scared about motherhood?" "Terrified," Claire admitted with a small laugh. "But in a good way, I think." "You'll be amazing at it," Melissa said, and for once there was no calculation in her voice, no hidden barb waiting to be revealed. "You've always been the nurturing one." We parted with tentative warmth, promises to stay in touch about wedding details, and a newfound sense that perhaps the most damaged relationship in our complicated triangle might not be beyond repair after all. As Claire's pregnancy progressed, our communication with Melissa became more frequent and, surprisingly, more genuine. She sent thoughtful gifts for the babies, custom-made cloud mobiles from an artist she knew in Paris, soft organic blankets from a boutique in Milan. When complications in her wedding planning forced her to reschedule the ceremony for the following spring, after Claire's due date, her first call was to make sure we were okay with the change. "I know the timing might be better for you this way," she said during a three-way call with Claire. "With newborns, you probably wouldn't want to travel anyway." "That's true," Claire agreed. "But I'm sorry your plans had to change. Is everything okay with you and Gregory?" "Perfect, actually," Melissa replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "We just realized we were planning the wedding everyone expected rather than the one we wanted. So we're scaling back, being more intentional. Fewer guests, more meaning." The irony wasn't lost on any of us, that Melissa, who had always prioritized appearances and grand gestures, was now advocating for authenticity over spectacle. People can change, it seemed, when they find what they've really been searching for all along. Our twins, Lily and Ethan, arrived on a crisp October morning after 36 hours of labor that tested Claire's endurance and my ability to remain calm in the face of her pain. When they were finally placed in our arms, tiny and perfect with Claire's dark hair and my cleft chin, the journey that had brought us to this moment, all its twists and betrayals and unexpected blessings, suddenly made perfect sense. "They're here," Claire whispered, exhausted but radiant as she held Lily while I cradled Ethan against my chest. Our family. The first few months of parenthood were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and moments of transcendent joy that made the exhaustion worthwhile. We learned to function on minimal sleep, to communicate in shorthand exchanges, to find humor in the chaos that had become our life. Claire approached motherhood the way she approached everything, with thoughtful intention and occasional perfectionism that I gently helped her temper. "They won't remember if their outfits match today," I assured her one morning as she fretted over misplaced baby socks. "But they'll feel how much we love them, how present we are with them. That's what matters." To everyone's surprise, including our own, Melissa proved to be an enthusiastic aunt. She visited shortly after the twins came home from the hospital, arriving with practical gifts and a refreshing lack of advice or judgment. "They're beautiful," she said, holding Lily with unexpected naturalness. "This one has your determination, Claire. Look at that focused gaze." Claire watched her sister with their daughter, emotions playing across her tired face. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "It means a lot." Melissa looked up, something vulnerable in her expression. "I've missed a lot of important moments in your life," she acknowledged. "I don't want to miss any more." It wasn't an explicit apology for years of competition and undermining, but it was as close as Melissa had ever come to acknowledging the damage she'd caused. Claire reached out to squeeze her sister's hand, a silent acceptance of the olive branch being extended. Later, after Melissa had left, Claire nursed the twins in the rocking chair we'd placed in their nursery, her face softened by the dim light and the contentment of the moment. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked, her voice low to avoid disturbing the drowsy babies. "If she hadn't cheated on you that night?" I knelt beside the rocking chair, watching our children's perfect profiles as they suckled. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I look at what we've built together, at these two miracles we've created, and I can only feel grateful for every step of the journey, even the painful ones." Claire smiled, eyes glistening with tears of exhaustion and happiness. "She told me once that you'd never do better than her," she whispered. "I wish I could have seen into the future then, could have known how wrong she was." "I knew," I said, the certainty in my voice surprising even me. "Not right away, but eventually. I knew I'd found someone exceptional in you, Claire. Someone genuine and kind and stronger than anyone gave her credit for. Someone who made me better just by loving me as I am." She leaned forward carefully, mindful of the babies, to press her forehead against mine. "We did it, didn't we? Built something real from the ashes of something broken." "We did," I agreed, kissing her softly. "And we're just getting started." Melissa and Gregory were married the following spring in an intimate ceremony on his estate in the Napa Valley. The twins, then 6 months old and sitting up on their own, attended in matching outfits that Claire had designed and my mother had sewn. During the reception, I watched Melissa dance with her new husband, her expression one of genuine happiness rather than the calculated satisfaction I'd so often seen during our relationship. Later, she approached us where we sat with the twins, who were beginning to fade after the excitement of the day. In her elegant wedding gown, with flowers in her hair and joy in her eyes, she looked younger somehow, unburdened. "Thank you for being here," she said, kneeling to stroke Ethan's chubby cheek. "It means everything to have my whole family together." Claire smiled, bouncing Lily gently on her knee. "We wouldn't have missed it." Melissa hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic humility. "I know I haven't always been kind to either of you. I've been competitive and selfish, and sometimes deliberately cruel." "Melissa, today is your wedding day," Claire began, but her sister shook her head. "No, let me say this. I need to." She took a deep breath, her gaze moving between us. "Watching you two, seeing the family you've created, the genuine partnership you share, it's helped me understand what real love looks like. Not possession or competition, but support and respect." She glanced toward Gregory, who was chatting with guests across the garden. "It's what I've found with him, finally. And I owe you both an apology for how I treated you in the past." I felt Claire's surprise mirroring my own. In all our complex history with Melissa, a straightforward apology had never been part of the equation. "Thank you," I said simply, recognizing the courage it had taken her to acknowledge her actions. "We're moving forward, not looking back," Claire added, reaching to squeeze her sister's hand. "All of us." Melissa smiled, relief evident in her expression. "I'd like that." She glanced at the twins, her expression softening. "They're going to need an aunt who spoils them terribly after all." As we drove home from the wedding, the twins sleeping soundly in their car seats, Claire reached across the console to take my hand. That felt like closure, didn't it? Like the final scene of a very long, very complicated story. I brought her hand to my lips, kissing her fingers where her wedding band caught the light. "Not closure," I corrected gently. "Just the beginning of a better chapter." And it was. Life continued to unfold with its challenges and joys, career evolutions, the twins' milestones, our own growth as individuals and as partners. We remained ourselves throughout it all. Claire with her thoughtful intensity and quiet strength, me with my steady pragmatism and deepening capacity for joy. Together, we created a home filled with laughter, honesty, and the kind of love that doesn't need to diminish others to validate itself. Sometimes when I watch Claire reading to our children, or catch her eye across a crowded room, or hold her close in the quiet darkness of our bedroom, I'm overwhelmed by gratitude for the twisted path that led me to her. Every painful moment, every cruel word, every shattered illusion, all of it necessary to clear the way for something authentic and enduring. Melissa was wrong about so many things, but her most significant error was in thinking I could never do better than her. The truth was both simpler and more profound. It wasn't about doing better or worse. It was about finding what was genuine in a world of calculated performances. It was about recognizing real love when it finally appeared, even in the unlikeliest of places. And in that recognition, in that choice to build something meaningful from the ruins of something false, lay the most satisfying revenge of all, the freedom to stop seeking revenge altogether, to instead create a life so full of authenticity and joy that the past loses its power to wound. In the end, I didn't marry Claire to prove Melissa wrong. I married her because she was right for me in all the ways that truly mattered. Our story, with its unexpected beginning and its continuing chapters of growth and discovery, became not a tale of revenge, but one of redemption. Not about proving someone wrong, but about finally getting something right. As Claire often says, sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most damaged soil. You just have to know what to plant, when to nurture, and most importantly, what to leave behind so new life has room to flourish.